There's nobody building agents the way we are building them right now. Nobody.
Okay, hot take. That's cool. Say more.
We've chosen a pretty unique point in the design space by allowing agents the degree of flexibility that we do. And you get immense power from that. But it's really, really hard because all those different like little subproblems we just talked about, it's much, much easier to build something where there's always a human in the loop driving it. And when you make it autonomous, the level of complexity goes up orders of magnitude. And then when you scale it up, that you again get
even more so
increase in complexity. Yeah. We use coding agents like Claude Code or Cursor or Codex all day. Very capable tool, but it's a tool that I'm at my keyboard driving this. And it goes off and does some work for a few minutes and comes back. And they're looking at how do we extend the length of time it can work autonomously? How do we get it to work for an hour, 3 hours, 4 hours, right? But what we're looking at is, okay, this relationship with the student, it's going to run 2 years.
As an undergraduate student, what agent do you wish you had access to?
Something to help understand.
Hello, humans. You're here for the VineDown, the show where we get real about lots of topics within higher ed. I am your host, Emily Smith. Listeners, you're hearing it in my voice. I am sick as balls this week. The conference season is upon us. I have been traveling like crazy over the last few weeks. I'm on the 4th week of back-to-back travel, and I wrapped it up in Las Vegas at a conference this week where the indoor air quality is, not good at all. So you're going to hear a different type of host this week, but we didn't want to reschedule because we have such a good guest this week. We have an internal guest this week, CollegeVine's very own CTO, Chris Coffey. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Emily.
Aside from being like voluntold to be here because we are colleagues. Fun fact about Chris and I are the only team members here at CollegeVine who went to Connecticut College. Chris and I did not overlap as camels at Conn College, but we sure went to the same college and share some interesting college traditions, don't we, Chris?
Sure do.
So what we want to chat about today, everybody, is sort of how CollegeVine is creating our AI agents. So we're talking a lot about AI agent platforms. I'm still doing a lot of education about what an AI agent is. And what we wanted to expose to you in the show today is more about where CollegeVine is and is headed about the sort of our AI platform and just the sort of technical and functional aspects of like what this is all about. Because those of you out there are listening and thinking, gosh, we get so much input all the time about different companies who have their different AI solutions and like, how are they different? What's real? What's not real? And what I want to do today is talk with Chris a little bit about a year ago, 2 years ago now, we've actually just started to deploy our AI agents. And we started with the AI recruiter. We took the world by storm with a crazy phone call with an AI recruiter named Sarah that just blew everyone's mind. And now we're at a place where we are actually deploying agents across a whole number of different jobs across the operating system of colleges and universities. We're deploying agents for financial aid, SAP verification, accreditation, a lot of advancement and student success things. And Chris, I want you to talk a little bit about sort of how did we get here from the AI recruiter? How did we get to a platform where we can deploy custom agents to do custom jobs across the whole operating system of higher ed?
Yeah, great question. So I think you remember we have our roots in SaaS software for enrollment, right? With kind of the recruiting network product, and from there, we as LLMs really started coming into the forefront, we were very, very, very early adopters in any of the publicly available LLMs. We recognized that these tools gave us like this unprecedented flexibility in the kinds of things we could do. And so that led us kind of, as we put together the recruiter, suddenly you have the ability to, have a conversation with Sarah, and it naturally can engage with you and understand not just, more traditional like natural language processing where you're like maybe pulling specific things out, but it can understand the intent of what you're trying to do. And you can start making some small decisions around that. And so we were, very early on in the recruiter, we started using it to make a lot of the decisions on how to most effectively help recruit and nurture students through the application process. And in doing that, we were able to leverage a lot of the pretty specific knowledge we'd learned over the years about like how enrollment operates and like what the problems that are there. And in doing so, we deployed the recruiter to hundreds of schools, and we've engaged with millions of prospects over the past couple of years. That taught us a huge amount about how to deploy systems like this. So autonomous systems working in the background, engaging with real people, using real tools like email or text message or phone, and how not to do it, right? And One of the things, though, that kind of really started happening at the beginning of this year was, we started getting more and more exposure to sort of student success via our one-stop product. And we started learning, just an immense amount about broader university operations, both student-facing, but then also like internal staff and faculty-facing operations as well. And in that same window, the underlying models that were driving kind of a lot of the decision-making in the recruiter were going through a like step function change. And so the transition from models like, GPT-4 as like the flagship model, if you think, back early 2024, versus where, when Claude 4.5 came out or GPT-5, like these were, orders of magnitude better models. They're faster, they're smarter, and that they're much, much, much more flexible in the kinds of decisions they can make. And so what that let us do was kind of take these things that we learned running agents at scale and look at, well, how do we take advantage of these improvements in the underlying models so that as they get better, we are able to capture more and more and more workflows and like really take load off of the very, very stressed teams. And so the big piece that we kind of started looking at was how do we move from the very specialized tooling that we built for our agents in enrollment to more general tools that can allow agents to interact with a much broader set of workflows in higher ed. And so that's really been the journey we've been on.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the ways in which like we first created AI Recruiter as our first agent, and I think about the ways in which like we constrained it on purpose, and we constrained it because the models that we had available to us at the time, we didn't trust as entirely as we do with the models that are available now, and that's only getting better with the sort of core functionality that drives this stuff across like models that are available sort of commercially now. And I think about those constraints and the ways that those showed up were down to then the actions and behaviors that the AI recruiter could take and sort of the lack of scaling into the different agents that we can head into now. So we're basically saying like and Chris, actually, let me say this to you and you can agree or disagree, but we're essentially entering a chapter where the models are now good enough that we're saying the reasoning should be kind of unchained. And we actually are betting on agent behavior being the best thing moving forward. I don't know. Help me refine that statement a little bit. I'm getting a little murky on it.
No. It's a great observation. Yeah, like the way to kind of think about it is, when we first launched the recruiter and even the one stop, we had very strong opinions. We still do have very strong opinions about what safe operation of these agents should look like. And
let's talk about that word safe. Like, what do we view that to be? Because I want to make sure we're defining our terms here.
Yeah, so right. We want to make sure that our agents are, never taking actions that are destructive, and that they're taking actions that would be aligned with like a human team member doing that job.
Right. Like if I give you a job, like Chris, your job is to email students. A bad way to do that job is like, I emailed students 400 times in 1 hour. Right. Like that would be exactly you doing the job in a bad way. Yeah.
Right. And we had to, back when models were stupider, we had to do a lot of work to make sure that they were behaving kind of in alignment with our intent.
Yeah.
But as models have gotten better and better, and one of the problems with that, I guess, when you really have to guide the behavior of the agent very, very tightly with a lot of guardrails, is you lose a lot of the flexibility, kind of like the really wonderful emergent behavior that you can get from these systems.
Oh, like it becomes brittle. It becomes rigid.
It does. Yeah. You have to add a lot of rigidity in order to steer its behavior in exactly the pathway you want it to take. And so, but we still need a lot of those guardrails. And so what we've been able to do as models have been becoming more and more capable is shifting where those guardrails live in the agent to give, kind of like we were saying moments ago, giving the agents a lot more control over the decisions they're going to try and make, but then making sure that our platform, which these agents are kind of like proposing decisions within, is still enforcing these guardrails, right? So we still want to make sure that the agent's never going to lose its mind and still send 400 emails in a day. But we want to give it a lot more space to make those decisions. And we want to, if it tries to send 400 emails in a day, we don't want to have a bunch of code controlling exactly what it does. Instead, we want to say, hey, that's a really bad idea, agent. Don't send 400 emails in a day. You already did that. And what's happened really over the past year is that they've become much, much better at taking that kind of feedback. And I don't want to say internalizing, but incorporating that into the decisions. And so one of the things that we've gotten much, much better at is providing that like decision feedback mid-turn, if you will, before it ultimately takes some action.
Well, and I appreciate seeing the reasoning of the agents there because you can actually see their thought process, finger quotes, around sort of getting to that. I also think that you and you haven't talked about this yet, but there's also sort of like a backstop at the tools layer that puts a firm limit on some of these things that makes it kind of even safer. So if we're talking about safety and the things that we care about with this example of like an agent suggests that a good action to take might be emailing a student like 400 times in a day. We don't think that's a good idea. The reasoning is going to kick in to start pushing that down. But also there's this like backstop on the tool layer.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you can talk about sort of agents, responsibilities, actions, and calling tools a little bit to educate this audience, because I think that framework feels really new to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things we sort of like hid behind the covers in the Recruiter in One stuff, but we're making much more front and center over time. So, yeah, I mean, fundamentally, an agent is just it's a program that's kind of like running autonomously in the world. It's going to get some events from the outside world, things happening, like emails are coming in, or you're learning maybe via like a data import that someone has transitioned their lead stage or a new employee started. And the agent becomes aware of those. And it has access to that information. It has its kind of instruction set, its behaviors that we've given it. And then it has access to a bunch of tools like sending an email, driving a browser agent, making a phone call, updating its internal knowledge about that individual constituent. And based on what's coming in and the knowledge and kind of tools that it has available to it, it's going to basically it's going to use tool calls, and it's going to say, all right, given Emily just emailed me in with a question about housing, well, I'm going to go, I know I have a tool available to go look into a knowledge base, which is all the information that the team has pushed into the agent to kind of train it on, essentially. And it'll go and it'll search that knowledge, try to find the answer to Emily's questions. It'll get that knowledge back in a pretty raw form. And then it will also have access to maybe a send email tool. And so it'll, given what it knows about Emily and the questions she sent in and its instructions and the knowledge it retrieved, it will draft a response and then try to send it to you. But let's say that response, I don't know, for some reason, maybe there was something in that response that like just didn't work. We
right.
We would want to check that. So before we send any communication from that email tool, we run it through a bunch of different sort of like moderation sub-agents and guardrails. We're going to check and make sure that we actually feel that response is safe. It's going to check for things like PII. It's going to check and make sure that it's aligned with the university's instructions and what they want that agent's persona to be, et cetera. All those checks have to pass before that email goes out. One of those checks is also, how many emails have you sent Emily without it being a response to her in some window, right? We kind of have a bunch of things like that we like to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good thought, because I do think when I talk to schools, and I'm, in this position, Chris, that like you're not in, you're sort of behind the scenes building this thing, and I'm out there talking to schools, like they do care about that. I mean, we really care about the treatment of students, and I think more so than in maybe other industries, we feel really responsible for the behaviors of whether it's our employees at a college or the agents that we hire, AI agents that we hire to do jobs. Like it is quite high stakes. And I think I appreciate that we're thinking about that in that same way. I'm curious how that takes us forward into the future as far as like the agents that we maybe haven't even thought yet, and the ways in which our scaling and functionality will continue to kind of grow and track to, again, like this is a big change from sort of the reasoning and sort of unchained nature of what we're allowing agents to do with reasoning in terms of what we favor now. And this is really different than what we even saw possible to be a year ago. Like what happens a year from now? Like how do we track with this?
Yeah.
And how do you view tracking with this as a company?
I mean, yeah, right. Like there's a bunch of research out there, a bunch of different groups looking at like benchmarking model performance improvements over time. And they're kind of both looking historically, but then also like forecasting out what does this mean? Right. We work very closely with a bunch of the foundation labs, and when we talk to their teams, like, yeah, they're all working on how do they make agents specifically more capable? How do they make these models better and better at reasoning about using tools? So when we look forward, I mean, one of the things that we're doing is like we work very closely with them on the specific kinds of like long running agents that we have deployed. Right, and we've had agents working with students for over a year at this point, the same student, and that's really novel, even to these big labs.
like novel across all industry groups
Yes.
that like
Yes.
that we CollegeVine offer them an observable opportunity for an agent working with an entity for longer than
Yes.
right, because if you think about customer service agents, the interactions are more transactional, shorter, resolve and end.
That's correct. And in most agents out there, it's not like all agents, but the vast majority of agents out there as well, there is a human driving the interaction. So I and my team are daily users of things like,
We talk about that as human in the loop, right? That's like,
yeah, exactly, human in the loop. We use coding agents like Claude Code or Cursor or Codex all day.
right.
I'm here, and it's a very capable tool, but it's a tool that I'm at my keyboard driving this. And it goes off and does some work for a few minutes and comes back. And they're looking at how do we extend the length of time it can work autonomously? How do we get it to work for an hour, 3 hours, 4 hours? Right. But what we're looking at is, okay, this relationship with the student, it's going to run 2 years. So how do we make sure that we understand the entirety of that relationship? And how do we make sure that as the model driving this agent, as those get better, how do we actually swap that model out behind the scenes and make that interaction even better? Right. And so really what we've done a ton of work on, and we was mentioning we work with them on this as well, is how do you safely do that? Right. How do you do that without dramatically changing the tone, the length, the style of these interactions? And so that's one of the areas I think when you look forward over the next year, what's going to happen? I think the models will become more and more capable. I think they'll become better and better at applying the right tool in the right moment. And I think also for us, the suite of tools that we make available to these agents is going to increase quite a bit. Like right now, one of the limiting factors is their benchmarks on kind of like the volume of decisions you can allow a model to make at any point in time. And I think that, and what happens is what those curves look like is they're an S curve. And so they're quite strong, and then they fall off a cliff in their performance. And I think that will continue stretching out. And I think they'll be able to handle more and more and more complex jobs to be done at, in our case, at universities, while also having more and more tools available to work those jobs.
Well, I think about the ways in which I've seen some of the new agents that we've created even in the last month or so, when you give them a remit on like 4 things a student needs to do. And it's like, Chris, we need you as a student to register for classes, do your financial aid form. You should probably sign up for a club or an activity, and also probably schedule an appointment with your advisor. But those 4 things are not one as important as the other, right? Like what we really need you to do is register by this date or things go super wrong. So really, we need you to super focus on that, and then the rest of the stuff can follow. And what's really interesting to me is that I'm watching the agent reason through like understanding what the important thing is and then focusing the student on the urgent thing. How does that happen? Like how does an agent do that?
Yeah. So part of it is, again, just kind of like the body of knowledge that they've been pre-trained on. But then a big piece of it is also our team. And, we have a lot of folks who have a lot of experience doing this. It's how you instruct, how you actually sort of, you mentioned responsibilities earlier. It's how you take, maybe you have a retention agent that you're using. How do you break that down into the sort of discrete responsibilities that agent has? Because, you mentioned 4 different things that might have to happen, and they might be of different levels of, importance at some given time.
Urgency, yeah.
Right. And they might relate to each other. They might not. They might be totally independent. You might have the same team member doing all of those things with students, but part of what we do is we kind of like decompose those down into different pieces, and then that allows the agent to really focus in on that specific piece of the responsibility. And that's a tool, kind of a tool. It's a technique that we use to also help our partners understand how the agent is performing on each of these different elements of it. Because to your point, maybe you need it to 100% of students have to get this thing done by this point in time. And if they don't, if we're 3 days before that deadline and it hasn't happened, they need to be escalating to a human staff member to like walk over and knock on their dorm room or something. And so, when we go and deploy with the customer, we'll sit down and we'll talk to them and try to really understand these requirements and then translate those into the agent's behaviors.
Yeah.
To make sure that we do capture that. And then we'll also on the backside configure evaluations on that agent that allow us to measure how is it performing against those objectives.
I think that's one of the most interesting things that we can talk about with schools is sort of the ways in which sort of like the multi-layered approach in terms of like moderation, fact checking, and then reportability and visibility helps to, I don't know, push the fear down a little bit, or at least I think and one thing that I'll sort of reflects to you live in the moment, because you and I, we don't talk all that often, and I'm like out there facing the world, and you're out there like in the back of the house building the thing. Like the thing that I would reflect is just I wish I could share with you the sort of relative temperature shift down when I can talk about the ways in which the agents are fact checked, moderated, and then reported and visible. It's just like, oh, okay. And then I can say something like, look, you've got a counselor out there in a high school gym saying Lord knows what right now, and like you'll never know about it. So wouldn't you rather see it if it's happening? One of the things, Chris, you just talked about was sort of our team and your mindset around, leading our team and our engineers. I know some of like two things that I think are interesting about the way you run our development team is like number one, you will sort of ruthlessly shrink scope in order to deliver things quickly. And you also really put a lot of positive pressure on the team to kind of own end-to-end quality in what we create. And I'm curious if your mindset as our technical leader has shifted or things you've learned over the last year. What have you actually adopted as sort of like new mental model and framework now that we are deploying things with like scaling AI solutions behind them?
Yeah. On one level, a lot of the principles that come from really running any large scale distributed system apply here. And one of the biggest challenges you talked about this moments ago is at a certain point where you have a complex system, right? Which when I say that, I mean like something that there's enough complexity that like no one person knows every detail about it, right? And especially when you have that's the natural state of all our software systems. But then you layer on also these kind of elements of the agents are fundamentally they're a non-deterministic machine learning system, right? And so we have this large distributed system that also has this non-deterministic behavior. So yeah, what we mean there is when you have so these language models are billions of parameters. And when the email comes in, it gets translated into something that model can actually work on. It is complex enough that you don't know what's going to come out the backside. You can't look at that input and say, I know exactly what text will come out the back. When I say draft an email to Emily in response to her question, I can't tell you, I can't get in my notebook and like scribble out the behavior of what will.
Right.
So that's kind of when we say like non-deterministic, when we're talking about like the agent's reasoning as well. We don't necessarily know upfront exactly what it will do. We know within pretty tight bounds what it will do because we train it and we kind of put those guardrails in place to guide that behavior. But you can't definitively say exactly what that will be. So when I say non-determinism, that's kind of what we're talking about, is we're giving up some of the when I program a computer, when I write code, I know 100% exactly what it will do every time I run it. And you give up some of that, but in exchange, you get this exponential increase in flexibility of that system. But you don't want to have something sitting there making a lot of decisions and like not actually knowing what it's doing, your high school gym analogy, right? So you want to be able to understand at a bunch of different layers, what is it doing? You want to know, are there certain things that like we know just they have to happen, right? We have to make sure that the content we're sending out is safe. Like that's not something we're going to flex on.
Negotiable. Yeah.
Exactly, right? We have to make sure that we actually can understand every single decision the agent makes. We want to be able to go back and look at it. We want to understand what happened there. Anytime the behaviors for the agent change, we want to be able to go back and see, okay, well, what exactly changed between one version of the agent and the next? All of these kinds of things matter a lot to understand sort of the evolution and what's happening right now at this moment. You want sort of this like deep level of auditability across a bunch of different dimensions.
Okay, that's super helpful. And I'm curious, Chris, like one of the conversations I have a lot with schools, particularly with CIOs, is the CIOs who think, I agree with this mindset that like a good CIO at an institution will say like, look, it's my job to be the strategic enabler of the business units within the college or university. I really like that mindset. And I really like that mindset from CIOs. And sometimes what I'll hear is, and so in order to do that, I'm going to have my team build a solution or like AIify something.
Yep.
And Okay, like, yes, I get that in my position as, like, lifer in the, ed tech vendor space that I go, like, "LOL, let's see how you can do that." I think we're in this really interesting chapter of sort of like this build versus buy conversation with CIOs. And what I really wanna offer them is like, yeah, you can build this stuff, just build it on a platform like ours and don't try to go build your build your own. What if we had a CIO who was hell-bent for leather on like, building stuff?
Uh-huh.
What would you tell that person? Like, what cautionary tales would you offer as the person who has lots and lots of super smart like, guys, I've worked in a lot of technology companies. My g I'm so sorry. My if you're a former developer colleague of mine, cover your ears because 'cause I'm about to be really rude. The developers we have at CollegeVine are so freaking smart. It's shocking to me, and I'm curious, Chris, as the leader of a bunch of really smart people who are developing this stuff full time, what would you say to the CIO who's hell-bent on, like, "Nope, we're building it ourselves?" Like, what is your cautionary tale here?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I would call back to kind of what I said earlier about, working with the research labs and stuff, right? There
Yep.
is now I talked to a bunch of people in the applied AI space, a bunch of other startups. Like, there's nobody building agents the way we are building them right now. Nobody.
Okay, hot take. That's cool. Say more.
Yeah. I mean, that I found. Like, maybe there are, but I haven't talked to them. There are a lot of companies building agents. There are a lot of agent builders out there. We've chosen a pretty unique point in the design space by allowing agents the degree of flexibility that we do, and you get immense power from that. But it's really, really hard because for all those different like little sub problems we just talked about, how do you get observability? How do you run this big scale distributed system? How do you have it be responsive and fast? How do you make sure it's reliable? How do you make sure that it's safe? How do you make sure it actually respects the behaviors that you're instructing it to have? How do you handle data access controls? All that kind of stuff. There aren't off the shelf systems, there aren't platforms, if you will, that you can just drop in to do this because the space is simply too new. And so through that lens, yeah, I would say like, yes, you could go and build agentic AI applications, but whether it is, purely agentic or not, it's much, much easier to build something where there's always a human in the loop driving it. And when you make it
Uh-huh.
autonomous, the level of complexity goes up orders of magnitude. And then when you scale it up, that you again get massive increases in complexity. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, like, sure, like you can do it. There are a lot of hard problems in here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you answered that in a very diplomatic way. I appreciate that. But CIOs, take note if you think you're gonna put part of your squad on that, please know it is hard. Well, Chris, as one of the brilliant minds behind CollegeVine's platform and agent creation here, I'm curious if you would give me kind of a personal answer to something, which is, as an undergraduate student, what agent do you wish you had access to? Like, what, as you go back in time, this is such like a psychobabble question. Like, what agent would little Chris have really, really been found useful? And as you create it with your team, are you like, oh, it would have been that would have been impactful for me as a student? Like, what would it have been? What do you wish you had?
That's a really fun question. Um, Looking back on many, many years ago, undergrad, I think something to help sort of understand different like major and kind of like potential like career trajectory kind of stuff. Again, Con had actually a pretty good.
Sales office.
Yeah, sales was great, but even then it was kind of much more difficult and less accessible than you might want it to be, right? So something that could, I would have pre-declared for a certain major, but like something that would maybe like push and pressure test on that, right? Kind of play the foil to a lot
Oh,
of the
like, and
assumptions.
then what are you gonna go do?
Yeah, exactly. Like something
Were
that
you
had
a
really.
CS major? What was your major?
No, I was a
Econ?
doubled econ IR.
Econ and what?
IR, international relations.
IR. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, for you to be like, okay, play that out. Like, here are the jobs that are going to be available for you. Because this was a liberal arts school, right? So it was drilled into our heads to be like well-rounded and that we were going to like be super good citizens of Earth and all this stuff. But like, you're saying it would have been useful for you to like go rubber meets the road, like what you're going to go do after con.
Yeah, and early, right? Like as a freshman.
I didn't even know the sales office existed. I missed that scholarship, like on the every student gets $3,000 to do their internship. Like super missed it because I like didn't know it existed.
Yeah, right. It's things like that. But yeah, something, if you imagine first semester as a freshman, it's like, great. Here's what you're thinking through, like doing a bit, allowing space to explore if you're like truly undecided, but also something to break you out of like some preconceived notions and like pressure test some of the realities of what I might want to be doing and like what that will look like over the next 4 years, and other things maybe go in this direction and look like what this might unlock for you.
I think that's awesome. Actually, that's a continuation of what I would have wanted, which would have been, do you remember first semester registration at Con, which was like during orientation, like we moved in and then we went across to the AC for registration, for course registration, like to pick your classes. And remember, the course catalog was the book.
Yep.
And with, I don't know, Fanning Hall on it or whatever. And then we went across to the AC to register for courses. And there was sort of like you had to like rush certain tables to get into certain like sections of things. I was particularly well prepared to go to college, like academically. Like college was super easy for me because I went to a prep school and I took all AP classes, and like academically, college was like a breeze. But that registration process blew my tiny little mind because we had to like go into the gym and like understand, like to your point, it would have been nice if someone had said like, look, here are the things you're interested in majoring in here, not only the jobs that you're going to get, but the course pathing to get me registered for that. I would have talked endlessly to an agent to explore that and make those plans because I felt super unprepared for that moment in the gym.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, for me, there were just so many, like, frankly, like, unknowns, right? There were all of these things I didn't know that I didn't even know I didn't know. And something to, like, open my eyes as early as possible.
Well, totally. And I think that's what agents are good at, is like keeping all of those details in their head to like guide the experience a lot better.
Yep.
Yeah. Unknown unknowns. I love that. Well, gosh, we've done now a corrective psychological experience for you and I minus 20 years. So get in the time machine, folks. Chris and I are correcting our young adult lives. Chris, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you. I am very, very picky about having an internal guest here on the show. I'm very careful about who our audience hears from, just because I don't want this to ever feel like, too much of a CollegeVine, we are so cool show. But I mean, we are so cool. And I really do want to expose like what we're all about, how we think about this stuff, and get that better exposed and have the audience sort of better educated about not only what AI agents are and what they're capable of broadly, but like how we think about them, and just get educated on that score. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
And folks, we'll see you out there for our next episode of the VineDown.